Today we're going to talk about Hanlon versus Bracken. The Indian Child Welfare Act is a 40-year-old federal law that protects the well-being and the best interests of Indian children and their families. With this, the ICWA does this by upholding family integrity and standability by keeping the Indian children connected to their community and their culture, while also reaffirming the inherent rights of tribal nations to be involved in the child welfare matters involving their citizens. For decades, the ICWA has been recognized by child welfare experts as a gold standard in child welfare practice, and the law has helped tens of thousands of Indian children and families find fairness and healing in state child welfare systems. In the past several years, anti-tribal interests have launched a series of legal challenges against the ICWA with the goal of broadly undermining the tribal sovereignty. The most prominent case challenge to the ICWA is, of course, Hanlon versus Bracken. The Native American Rights Fund, the NARF, is involved with the Bracken case in two ways. First, the NARF, with a co-counsel of Dence's LLP, has followed the Tribal Administrator's brief at every stage of the case. The Tribal Administrator's brief for the Fifth Circuit Court represented 48 six federal recognized tribes and 59 national and recognized tribal organizations in support of the ICWA. As in earlier stages of this case, the tribal administrator's brief that will be submitted to the Supreme Court in August of 2022 will ensure that the court hears a unified message from the tribes in support of this vital, important law. Which leads me into my second point here, is that the NARF facilitates the Tribal Supreme Court project, which works to coordinate the broader pro-ICWA obnoxious strategy for the case. And this is why it's strategically and most vitally important for the native tribes here. And this leads me into litigation here and in the past history of these continuance and battles. And in 2018, a federal district court in Texas, in a widely criticized decision, held that the ICWA violates the U.S. Constitution. This decision was in many ways unprecedented. Never before has a federal court found the ICWA unconstitutional, and the federal Supreme Court has consistently rejected arguments that federal Indian statutes violate the Equal Protection Clause or exceed Congress authority under the Indian Commerce Clause. But in September of 2021, the U.S. Department of Justice, interviewing tribal nations and Texas and individual plaintiffs, all formally asked the United States Supreme Court to review the Fifth Circuit Embrack decision. In February 2022, the Supreme Court granted all four petitions and consolidated the case, and the parties' legal briefs were submitted throughout the spring and summer 2022. And the case is scheduled to be heard in November 2022. During this briefing, there was saw that beneath of those championed the ICWA and an outpouring of support, 497 tribal nations and 62 native organizations, 23 states and DC, 87 congresspeople, and 27 child welfare and adoption organizations, and many others signed onto the 21 briefs submitted to the U.S. Supreme Court in favor of upholding the ICWA. The large bipartisan coalition of tribal leaders and policymakers and organizations understand that the far-reaching consequences of challenging the ICWA constitutionally in the Hanlon versus Bracken will be felt for generations to come. Both the native and non-native people and organizations have authorized or authored briefs ranging from legal perspectives affirming ICWA's constitutionality to first-person perspectives from those who live are most impacted by the ICWA, children and families navigating the child welfare system that are so horribly in the United States. The child development expertise provided in some briefs that show us the court that the ICWA serves children in the family's best interest. Additionally, tribal leadership, legal experts, and policymakers make the case that ICWA is not only constitution, but also upholds the respect of tribal sovereignty. And that is simply here the case, Hanlon versus Bracklin, that the Indians or the Native Americans here are fighting for their sovereignty and their importance to have strategic and vital support for the ICWA for their children, not to face the consequences of the brutal American child welfare system. And that is simply today's case. Thank you.